Join the Coven. Happy Halloween from the gas station. A story written by Jack Townsend. Links to his Reddit and Amazon author page available in the description and pinned comment below. It needs stitches, but I'm afraid this is the best we can do for now. Yen had carefully butterfly bandaged together what she could and smothered the rest of my left hand under a gauze mitten. I've got to ask. Yeah, I was already missing that pinky from before. No, I was gonna ask. What the hell happened in there? I looked at Jerry, who was standing shirtless next to me and applying his own bandages. He gave me the look, the one I'd come to understand as, "You're in charge here, buddy." If we were going to tell them the truth, it would need to come from my mouth. If we were going to attempt a cover-up, I'd have to be the one to think of a good lie. There was a raccoon. Yen pulled down my shirt collar and shined her flashlight at my millipede leg track marks. A raccoon? You look like you've been dragged under a sewing machine. Jerry ran with it. That's exactly what happened. The raccoon had a sewing machine gun. It was knucking fuds in there. Hey, do we have any more of that rubbing alcohol? Lucy was pretending not to watch, but even in the dim red glow of the emergency light, I noticed her steal a few passing glances at Jerry's tattoos. An angry voice cut into the air. If there's another riled coon running around, you need to do something about it right now before we all get rabies. Lucy snapped back. That's enough out of you. Owen was on the floor a few feet away, his hands zip-tied to the drain pipe below the frozen drink machine. Besides a slight welt on his cheek and some frizzled hair, he didn't look too much worse than when we went into the cooler. On the other side of the room, Bart lay motionless beneath a packing blanket. There was no reason to rush for his sake anymore. I didn't get the whole story. From what I gathered, Owen had a change of heart about Jerry's plan shortly after the chair went into place, trapping us inside the cooler. He just couldn't bring himself to surrender his weapon. All pretense of innocence went out the window after Lucy found the CB radio and Owen smashed it into pieces. He needed more time to think, he said, to make sure everyone was on the same page with their stories. He couldn't risk getting caught up in this. It would have been too much of an inconvenience for a man with his level of visibility. Lucy took the gun from him. Owen put up a fight. It ended with him on the floor, zip-tied to a drainage pipe. I would have paid every penny I had to have seen how it went down. But sadly, Lucy was conservative on the details, so I'd have to let my imagination do the work. Bart held on for as long as he could. But it wasn't enough. He passed moments before Lucy opened the cooler door and found the two of us in a pile of blood and vomit. Maybe we should have never tried to stop him. Maybe he would have been fine if he had gotten into his delivery truck and hit the road. Maybe my decisions were responsible for what happened. There was going to be a whole lot of maybe that I had to live with. But that depended on me living first. Somewhere inside this poorly lit room was a hyper-intelligent parasitic creature that had been killing and consuming people for eons. And right now, it was hatching a plan to make sure we didn't leave here alive. Yen had moved on to the line of dots on my chin. The medicine stung like hell, but compared to the millipede, this was a cakewalk. "Thanks," I said as she taped up the bandage. "So, if you're not a doctor, what are you, like a nurse or something?" "I'm a vet." "You mean, like a member of the armed forces?" "Nope," she said bluntly. "Well, that's probably okay, as long as she knows her way around a pack of gauze. I'm happy to have her here." "I am." Owen's voice surprised me. Yen turned around and shined the light at him. He had the floor now. I spent 12 years in the Marine Corps. I was stationed in Iraq fighting terrorists while you were in high school. Look, I know I might have messed up. In the heat of the moment, I discharged my weapon, and there was some friendly fire. But I am not your enemy. If you want help catching this rabid coon, then cut me free, because you aren't equipped to handle this situation. I don't even need my weapon back. If it makes you feel safer, you can let the little guy hold the gun. I had to assume that he was referring to me by the little guy. It was patronizing, but he may have had a point. Not about freeing him, of course, but about us not being equipped to handle this situation. The baseball bat at my side probably wouldn't be enough if we found what we were looking for, or if it found us. Lucy stepped over to Owen and asked, "Where were you stationed?" "What?" She repeated herself, a little more forcefully. "Where were you stationed, Owen?" "I told you, Iraq." "What base?" He hesitated. She continued, "What city?" He shook his head. "I don't have to explain my time in the service." "What kind of weapon were you issued?" I was issued an M16. It's a standard." "You were in the Corps for 3 years. You should know the answer to this. What size ammo does an M16 use?" What's the capital of Iraq?" He looked flummoxed. As soon as Lucy turned her back on him, he spewed the words, "F you." "Let me out of here." He thrashed against the pipe, leaning his weight into it, then fell limp onto the ground, simpering. I turned to Jerry and said, "I think it's time we're going to need to get the code black box." Jerry had stripped all the way down to his friendship is magic boxers and tossed his soiled clothes into a heap by the front door. "Are you sure?" he said. "Are you positive that this is worthy of a code black?" "If this isn't, then I honestly don't want to imagine what is." "All right, I'll be right back." He started for the supply closet until I stopped him. "Wait!" "What?" "You shouldn't go alone. It's not safe. What if that raccoon tries to get you?" "It's fine. Remember, I'm immune to its, cooties." "Yeah, but even if you can't get the, cooties for some reason, that thing can still rip you apart like a paper shredder." Lucy walked up to Jerry and said, "I'll go with you. We'll stay in groups, and if we see any raccoon, I'll take the shot." Jerry and I both blurted "No!" at the same time. Why not? Lucy had already demonstrated an impressive competency to know when to trust people and when to call people on their crap. She knew something was up. I tried for a convincing answer. "We need to make sure it's the right one. Don't want to waste bullets on an innocent raccoon." She gave me a stare that screamed, "I know you're lying, Jack." But she didn't call me out. Yen ventured into the conversation. "What kind of raccoons do you have around here? Because I've seen a lot of raccoon attacks in my day, but nothing about this looks right." "They're advanced," I said. "Highly advanced." A minute later, Jerry and Lucy were back in the front room with us. He had brought out the meter-long rectangle box labeled Code Black for emergencies only. He had also displayed an excellent amount of initiative by grabbing the Code X box. Code X wasn't specifically for situations like this. It was really more of a preparation for whenever one of us needed to work an unexpected double shift without notice. But the contents were incredibly useful. We changed into the spare clothes, sweatpants and black t-shirts, and took turns taking swigs from the bottle of mouthwash and spitting them out into a styrofoam cup. I was concerned by just how much blood was in my spit. It was, to put it mildly, way above average. With the minor hygiene maintenance done, we opened the lid on the Code Black box. Yen gasped. Lucy let out, "What the hell?" Jerry whistled like he didn't already know what was in there. I sighed. Opening this felt like I had lost some kind of personal challenge. The contents of the Code Black kit were carefully picked out, After detailed consideration of many factors, Jerry and I debated the merit of every single thing that went into it. Nothing here was chosen lightly. I took out the first weapon, a Glock 19 that someone had left in the gas station after he didn't need it anymore. Long story. I checked the safety to make sure it still wasn't there. Then put the gun onto the booth table. Next, I pulled out the old bear trap. There was dry blood on the teeth, definitely too big to do the job we needed. Next, I pulled out another handgun, then another. I kept removing weapons, setting each down on the table with care until I finally found what I was really looking for. At the bottom of the box, taking up the space from one corner to another, was Jerry's main contribution to the kit. The old katana he found at a garage sale and spent 2 weeks sharpening until it was clean enough to shave with. I pulled the weapon out by the sheath and handed it to its rightful owner. "Sweet," Jerry said, taking it from me with 2 hands, the only respectful way to take such a weapon. Next, I went right to work, piling the guns into the belly slack of my new shirt, so I could carry them all together. As I transported the guns behind the counter, Lucy started questioning me. To be honest, it's surprising that it took this long. "Hey, wait a second, where are you going with these things?" She followed me closely, which was good because I needed her flashlight to see the numbers on the dial of the store safe. "Just putting away the stuff we don't need." She walked over and crouched down by my side. It was just us now. She whispered, "What's really going on, Jack?" I turned the dial and answered, "May as well tell you the truth. It's not a raccoon we're looking for." "I kind of figured. There's a creature in here with us, and it's what killed Abram. It almost killed me and Jerry." I turned the knob and opened the safe and immediately started stacking the guns inside. Lucy asked, "If there's a killer monster inside the building, why are you getting rid of the only things that we have to defend ourselves with?" "Because," I answered, "it's smart. It knows what weapons are, and it can take over our minds. A gun won't kill it, but if it infects one of us while we're armed, if it manages to get a hold of a gun, then that's game over. We can't let it use our weapons against us." I looked into her eyes for any sign of doubt or sympathy. I tried to study her to see if she was buying it, but she looked like she was doing the same thing to me, studying my face. We just watched one another for a heavy, solid moment until she looked down, pulled out Owen's gun, and handed it over. "Well, in that case, don't forget this one." I dropped it inside the safe, closed the door, and spun the dial. "Thanks," I said. It turns out Yen's impressive voice translates into an even more impressive scream. This wasn't like the noise she made when she found Abram. This was twice as loud. I felt it in my bones. My first thought as we jumped to our feet was, "Oh God, that thing has gotten a hold of Yen." But then Lucy shined her light into the room and I realized that I was wrong. The millipede queen had found herself a new host, and now Bart's body was standing in the middle of the room, staring at his hands and wriggling each of his fingers, a crazy smile on his face. Jerry held the sword over his head and dramatically unsheathed it. "Zombies again, eh? All right, let's do this." He ran across the room and swung the blade straight down. It lodged itself into the top of Bart's skull, about an inch deep and stuck. Jerry pulled, but Bart jumped back, taking the wedged weapon with him. The blade was now protruding from his head like a unicorn horn. "Wow," Jerry said. "That was not nearly as easy as I thought it was going to be. Bone is hard." Lucy grabbed me by the arm and pulled me to the ground behind the counter. "Combination, open the safe. Do it now." "I can't." "Why not?" "It's on a timer, on a battery. The safe won't open more than once every 8 hours. She grunted. In a flash, she was back on her feet and leaping over the counter. By the time I got to the other side, she had already raced over to the table, grabbed the baseball bat, and cracked it over the Zombart's head. It, predictably, had little effect. The Zombart lifted his hand, gripped the blade, and pulled it free. This was exactly what I was worried about. The monster had gotten a hold of one of our weapons. I knew this was going to happen. I'm a genius. Owen was screaming and thrashing. Yen was hiding behind Jerry now, moving in my direction, and the Bark Queen was heading away from all of us? Ah, good. I quickly realized it was heading towards the door. Ah, bad. Bart lifted the blade and flicked it down, shattering the glass door into a million pieces. The cloud of green flowed inside like a fire hydrant had busted. In a matter of seconds, we had lost all visibility. The air turned warm, then hot. Tiny wings and legs the size of hairs blasted my skin. I stepped forward, holding my breath and reaching into the fray, hoping against all hope that my fingers would find salvation. I felt skin. Immediately, a hand grasped my wrist and yanked me forward. My eyes were closed, but mayflies coated the lining of my lids, wriggling to get underneath. Whoever was holding my arm continued to pull, so I continued to follow, until finally they fell to the ground, taking me with them. As soon as my hands touched the floor, I regained my bearings. I'd know this sticky concrete anywhere. We were inside the storage closet again, which meant I felt my way along the floor until I reached the corner. There should be a box here. Code Blues, Code Blues. Where is it? I found what I could only hope was the correct cardboard box. Ripped it open, reached inside, and felt around until Eureka! The flashlight. The normal flashlight. As soon as I clicked it on, the swarm surged loudly enough for me to hear it, like a tempest wave crashing against the side of a boat. Green splattered the wall as some of the bugs became victims of their own stampede. With all the strength I had remaining, I tossed it out the doorway. The cloud of bugs, now a solid wall of green, heaved in unison after it, catching it, freezing it in midair, and quickly consuming it. Jerry slammed the door shut and slid the deadbolt into place. Why, you might ask, does our supply closet deadbolt from the inside? Well, obviously, for such an occasion as this. I hacked up and wiped dead bugs and guts off of myself. Soon I became aware that I wasn't the only one. Next to me, Lucy was feverishly pinching off the remaining insects and stomping or clapping them into oblivion. Next to her, Yen sat with her back against the wall, staring at something miles away. I couldn't believe it. In the chaos, we had all grabbed each other's hands and worked our way into safety. We were all safe. Wait, no, that's not exactly right. I counted heads again just to make sure. Yeah, looks like someone didn't make it. Another mayfly tried racing up my nose. I pinched it and wiped the gooey mess onto my shirt. Then, quite unexpectedly, the doors of reality fell off their hinges. Part 6. There aren't any words to describe what happened. Honestly, this isn't a job for words. You could try staring directly into the sun for about 10 years, while someone pours oatmeal into your ears through a funnel. To be clear, that's not what it felt like, but that might open your senses to a degree of perception that would allow the inference of the idea to exist in your mind. However, we don't really have time for that, so I'll give language a shot and do the best I can. I found myself falling off the face of the world. Like my mind had been a one-dimensional cup of coffee stretched out and remastered into 3D, played backwards, on a network of computers that could only be used by beings with eyes that see in reverse. My coffee, the thoughts spilled out all over the table. There's a table in the simulation, right next to the bowl of fruit. Time slowed down for me. I could control it. I could make it stop if I wanted to, and yet I was acutely aware that the time flow for everyone else and everything else was still ongoing. And while that may seem like, for all intents and purposes, time was still moving normally for me as well, I can assure you that time was... Where was I? I looked around me and realized that I had slipped out of my body long ago. I'd forgotten it back at the gas station, in a closet surrounded by swarms of gnats. And I'd left my wallet, keys, and phone on my body. So I was truly naked now in the most literal and metaphysical way possible. I was somewhere inside of an infinity, and my brain was somewhere inside of another infinity, and my body was somewhere inside a different infinity, and in some ways I was infinity. I felt the universe's cruel love and understood that I was just a molecule in an exploding star. The world didn't need me. I could live and exist amongst the cosmos forever. There was a gorgeous, shining light, and I was part of it. All the pain my mortal body had ever endured was so small in comparison to forever. I was at peace. The whole stupid, scary gas station thing was dumb anyway. Maybe in the next life, I could be a bat. Some bats eat fruit, right? I could do that. Sleep all day, eat berries all night, fly in a group with friends, live forever, solve mysteries, ride roller coasters. Bats ride roller coasters, don't they? If not, they will. I just need to rearrange reality slightly so I can do and be anything I want. I felt a shock, the universe pushing back against my absurd attempt to interrupt the melody. The song was already in motion. I couldn't change it, only listen and enjoy. Close enough. I settled in to ride the wave, to see what the storyteller had in store for it. Jerry smacked me across the face. Dude, snap out of it. We've got stuff to do. What? I was back in the gas station supply room, sitting in the corner and drooling all over myself. How long had I been gone? And where exactly had I gone to? Yen knelt in front of me and shined the red flashlight in my eyes. His pupils are dilated, she announced. Did you hit your head? Yeah, probably. This could be a sign of traumatic brain injury. We need to get out of here and find a hospital. Nah, Jerry interrupted. It's just the drugs finally kicking in. I sat up and the entire world sloshed into place after me. The room had some momentary lag to it, and strangely enough, I could see everything as clear as ever. What drugs? I asked. Okay, so promise you won't get mad, he said. I will not promise that. Okay, well, if you promise you won't get mad, I'll tell you. Remember how I requested to work tonight? Well, the reason was, I needed someone responsible like you to be here in case things got heavy, you know, because I trust you to make sure I'm safe and not call the cops if I have a bad trip. The world finally snapped into place around me. Everything was back to normal, except for the fact that I could suddenly see everybody's aura. Looking back, that seems rather strange, but at the moment it felt perfectly inconsequential. What did you do? I asked. Jerry's aura was a strange kind of sunny yellow and pink, swirling with vibrant energy. It was a controlled chaos, like a Picasso painting in a blender. Well, as you know, Halloween is sacred to me, and I wanted to make sure I did something special for it. So I made some hallucinogenic tea, and I may have been microdosing for the past few days to optimize my high. I thought it would let me see some other worlds, but for the most part, it just showed me truths about how tiny we are in the universe. I know, right? I said with excitement before snapping out of the spell. What was in that flask you gave me? It's a special homebrew. There's a few different ingredients. Primarily, he mumbled a couple of words under his breath as his aura shifted to purple and baby blue. He didn't want me to know. Come again? He couldn't look at me. I said primarily ayahuasca and peyote. Lucy let out a loud and inappropriate "Ha!" Yen gave her a disapproving mom face, but Lucy shrugged. What? That's actually funny. You know, in a we're all gonna die, but at least you're high kind of way. Her aura was bright orange and fire red. Yen's was cool blue and wavy. I'd prefer we find a way out of this where nobody else has to die. My tongue felt funny. I don't know a lot about recreational drugs. Jerry seemed almost offended by my choice of words. His aura made a frowny face as he explained. These are not recreational. They're spiritual and medicinal. Native Americans use peyote to treat influenza, snake and scorpion bites, even blindness, because it helps you see out of more than just your eyes. Yen nodded. Actually, he's not completely wrong. Ayahuasca has been used for ages by indigenous peoples to combat tropical parasites. Lucy said, Great, so we accidentally dumb-lucked our way into the antidote for zombieism? Zen was quick to distance herself from where the conversation was headed. Wait, we're not honestly saying Bart is some kind of, reanimated corpse? That's absolutely absurd. He must have simply had a weak pulse that I couldn't detect. The blood loss probably left him confused and disoriented. And that brain injury from the sword must be what caused him to break the glass in an effort to get away. There's a perfectly normal explanation for everything that happened tonight. How annoyingly rational of her. Lucy scrunched up her nose. You may be right, but I've seen enough weird crap in my life to know that monsters are real. I don't suppose you guys have any more of that stuff, do you? Alas, Jerry answered. Jack Power chugged it like he was a freshman at Rush Week. Sorry, I said. Not as sorry as you're gonna be. There's a fuse before that stuff hits all at once. And if you're not used to the effects, well, you may find yourself falling in and out of corporeality. That's normal. If you end up in the other place, look for the Mescalito spirit to be your guide. He doesn't always appear for the first-timers, but considering how much tea you drank, I think he'll pretty much have to show. I nearly jumped out of my skin when we heard the sound of a knocking at the door. And with those drugs coursing through my veins, such a thing felt very possible. Who is it? Jerry said in a strange, high-pitched voice. Open the door, blasted Owen. Or at least something using Owen's voice. Yen jumped from the door, but Lucy snatched her by the wrist with both hands and stopped her. Let go, he said. Owen's out there in that mess. The voice on the other side of the door was desperate. Come on, let me in. These things are everywhere. I can barely breathe. He started coughing loudly, convincingly, then continued. Please, I'm hurt. I'm bleeding really badly. You have to open up. Yen shook her hand free from Lucy's grasp and said, We have to let him in. He'll die out there. I know he's a jerky person, but he doesn't deserve this. Her aura was glowing white hot, but something else was drowning it out. I could see the aura of whatever was standing on the other side of the door, and it was monstrous, hungry, and angry. It was shaped like a human, but it radiated an unholy energy. Now I understood. This must have been what Jerry saw when he looked at Abram. It acted human, presented human, but it was not. Hey, I said, pulling myself to my feet. That's not Owen. If you open the door, we're all screwed. Her aura went red the moment she made up her mind. I knew what was coming, but I didn't have the time to stop it. You're all crazy. With that, she lunged forward and slid open the lock. The door swung open immediately, and the vessel that had once been Owen, stepped inside our room. His face was covered in lines of green dots, racing around and over one another, crawling in and out of the holes where his nose and eyes used to be. His once handsome face was now skeletal caverns for the highway of insects wearing away to the bone as the mobilized army of infant mayflies took millions of tiny bites. He lifted his hands, one of which had been degloved at the wrist where the zip tie had held him in place. His fingers caught Yen by the throat and squeezed her screams into silence. They both went down. Yen hit her back against the floor. That thing landed on top of her, still squeezing. Its jaw opened as a pair of long, thin appendages reached out, dangling from the other side of his teeth, inches above her face. The swarm of insects invaded the room. Jerry launched onto Owen's back. Lucy grabbed the flashlight and broke it against Owen's face. The thing released its grip on Yen just long enough to grab the other two and throw them into the hallway. When it turned back to its victim, the queen was already halfway removed from Owen's mouth, its eyes staring at the poor woman crying in front of it, its fishbone legs scratching the skin of Owen's mouth away in chunks, like it couldn't wait to free itself. Suddenly, they were far away. Or I was far away. No, not now. Keep it together, Jack. You can trip later. They need you. The room was gone. I was standing outside. Cold, wet air blew against my face, filling my nostrils with the smell of wood, smoke, and sand. The sky above me was filled with crisp stars, reaching all the way down to the horizon on all sides. The earth beneath me was brown. Nearby, a fire crackled, inviting me over. But the queen thing, it was about to crawl inside Yen? I slowly turned around, a full 360 degrees. There was no Yen here, no millipede, no gas station. This felt just as real as anything. Maybe I had hallucinated the whole thing. Maybe I'd never even worked at the gas station. Maybe I'd just come out here to do some drugs and now I couldn't remember which side of the dream I started out on. I walked over to the fire. Not like I had much choice. My only options were A, approach the fire, or B, don't approach the fire. I already tried B without any success. The bonfire was only 3 logs big, but put off enough heat that I could feel it from 10 feet away. As soon as I was close enough to enter the bubble of warmth, I heard the man standing next to me. "You're finally here, Jack." He was taller than me, by a couple of heads. His skin lime green, with pointy ears and no hair. He wore no clothes, and I kept my eyes aimed up at his face, just to stay polite. "Hi," I said, doing my best impression of a friendly gas station clerk. "Who are you?" "I'm like your spirit guide or whatever." He had a distinctly surfer bro accent. Not at all what I expected. I mean, I didn't expect anything, but especially not this. "I'm here to show you how to find the answers you seek, I guess." "Oh, okay, well, I was in the middle of something when I got here. Do you think we can rain check this and send me back? I'm pretty sure my body is being eaten by bugs as we speak." "Your body is safe, but your mind is torn asunder." The vision waved its green hands as it spoke. It felt slightly overreacted, but I was going to be polite. "Your thoughts are poisoned, you bleed memories, your spiritual injuries go deep, and if you do not tend to them first, your body will outlive you, man." I sighed. "Okay, fine, how does this work? What's the fastest way to get this over with?" The Mezzi spirit crossed his arms and said, "Well, I guess we can dispense with the formalities." "Great. I hate formalities." "Aw, me too, man. Okay, let's get right into it. First, a few ground rules, okay? Number 1, no kissing." "What?" "Absolutely no kissing, understand? I can't even tell you how many times people have tried to make out with me. Like, come on. I'm a primeval spirit of nature, not some booty call. Anyway, number 2. If you want to listen to music..." His words turned into a muted scream as the blade entered his neck. Another figure had appeared out of darkness, jumped onto the spirit's back, and drove a fillet knife into it. The spirit hit the ground as the man removed the knife and stabbed it back, over and over. Black blood sprayed out in every direction as the man turned him into a bloody pincushion. He held the knife handle with 2 hands and thrust it again and again until the blood wasn't spraying anymore. The man heaved loudly until his breathing returned to normal. Then he plunged the weapon one last time in the spirit's neck, all the way to the hilt, before standing up and dusting himself off. Once done, he looked at me and gave a strange smile. "Hey, Jack, looks like I got this one just in time. Are you okay?" The man looked like Abram. At least, mostly anyway. He was a fair amount younger, slightly thinner, and his yellowed beard was almost brown. "What the hell did you do that for?" I asked. "What are you talking about?" His voice was definitely Abram's. "I just saved your damn life." The man looked at the destroyed creature at his feet, as doubt crept into his words. "Didn't I?" "No." "What? Really? It looked like one of them aliens, like the one they caught humping goats on the Brown farm. I mean, look at him. He's all green." "Lots of supernatural things are green. That was the spirit guide. He was supposed to show me how to navigate this plane of existence." "Oh, really?" "Yes." Abram kicked at the body. It didn't budge. "Well, damn. Honest mistake, Jack." With nothing else to do with our night, we tried digging a hole to bury the body of our deceased spirit guide. But the ground was just too hard, so we gave up almost right away. In the end, we decided to roll the body away and try to ignore it while we sat down by the fire. I had to wonder if anyone had ever killed their spirit guide before. Was there a protocol for this kind of thing? Was I going to get in trouble? Jerry would probably know the answers to that. Wherever Jerry was. Which reminded me, I was still trapped in another state of materiality from where I was supposed to be. The young version of Abram pulled a burning twig away from the fire and used it to light a cigarette. "How did you even get here?" I asked. "And what are you? Like, kind of ghost or something?" Abram laughed. "Come on, Jack, there ain't no such thing as ghosts." "That's debatable." "Nah, see, I'm just a vestige of the Mayfly Queen. The thing is, she don't just take over a host. What she does is way more cruel." He took a slow drag before continuing. Evidently, this vestige wasn't in any hurry, and from the look of things, it wouldn't have mattered if he was. We didn't have any real way out of this. The Queen doesn't do much work for herself. She outsources it all. She makes her host eat for her, makes it breathe for her. I even had to remember things for her. Supposed to just be a one-way street. But there's always a little cross-contamination. Some of my memories stayed inside of her when she made me kill myself. And when your brain got sloppy seconds, she must have deposited some Abram thoughts inside your dome. That's what I am. "Ah," I said, "that's really gross. But as long as I have you here, maybe we can make the most of it. Is there anything you can tell me about the Queen? Any weaknesses? How do I kill it?" "I'm afraid you ain't got much option. All I know is this, and don't ask me how I know it. The Queen needs a body to stay alive. She can make do with a corpse for a little while, but if she can't crawl into a healthy host after about 5 minutes, she's done. That's why she made me come to the gas station." He closed his eyes and rubbed them. His lips quivered like he was trying to keep from breaking. You okay?" "She made me do it. She made me do so many things. I honestly didn't even know why I was doing it. I didn't know I was infected. Started with weird little stuff. I got all these crazy cravings. I wanted to drink puddle water, wanted to eat dirt. I just had to live with it. I thought we all got our mess ups, right? Then couple of months back, I started having to collect corpses, mostly roadkill at first. Then a new urge hit me. I had to start setting traps. Then I started collecting pets. I ran out of room in my deep freeze, so I started stacking them wherever they'd fit in my house. I've been sleeping in a hotel for the last week because I couldn't stand the smell anytime I went home. And let me remind you, I drive garbage trucks for a living. I tried to think of some way to change the subject. This was horrible, but not exactly useful information. When I couldn't think of anything, I let him continue, hoping he was almost out of steam. That thing inside my brain forced me to fill up the back of my garbage truck with all this rotting meat and drive it out to the gas station where we'd be separated from the rest of town. She remembered all the times I saw you out there and thought it would be a safe hunting ground. Turn one of you into her new host, turn the others into food, alongside the meat from the garbage truck. Then she'd spend the next 5 years laying more eggs. You don't want to know how she lays her eggs in other people, Jack. It's really nasty. But I couldn't help it. I didn't have any control. Even when she made me take that knife and... He balled his hands into fists. Well, let's just say I finally feel like myself again. I looked away from him and stared at the fire. This sucked. I knew what I was going to have to do, and I hated it. What's wrong? He asked. The queen needs a healthy host. If I'm going to kill it, there's only one way to do that. I have to make sure there aren't any healthy hosts left to occupy. What do you mean? When I get back to the gas station, I'm going to have to kill Yen and Lucy. Clap, clap, clap. I turned to see the naked green giant standing behind us and slowly clapping his hands together. There, you figured it out on your own. This was all part of your spiritual voyage. I was meant to get stabbed all along. I stood up and faced the vision. Really? Yeah, Jack. This is totally how I intended it for it to go. And now that you have your epiphany, I'm gonna, send you back or whatever. Don't forget if you enjoyed your vision to rate me 5 stars. Alright, my guy, time to go home. I shot up, struggling for air and finding none. I was underwater, flailing, bathed in darkness. The world clung to my limbs, pulling me, resisting my motions. I gasped and fell and hit my head, and then my hands touched the sticky concrete floor. The universe stopped spinning, and I regained my bearings. I was back in the supply closet, wrapped up beneath a plastic tarp. I carefully pried it free and sucked in as much air as my lungs would take. My head pounded, my bruises screamed, my left hand was numb all the way to the wrist. But I was alive, and even better, my hallucinogen night vision was still working. Wait, that's not right. The light was on overhead, which meant someone or something had found the breaker box and turned power back onto the station. The supply closet door was shut, and I was all alone. If you don't count the dried up carcass of a businessman by the door, or the oodles of carnivorous green dots crawling in, on, and around him. I couldn't tell how long I'd been in the other place, but something told me I still had time to stop the queen. But if I was going to do that, I would need to open the one box I'd hope I never needed to open. It was the most desperate measure, for sure. But these were the most desperate times. When this whole thing blows over, I'm going to need a long vacation. I climbed to the top shelf, reached into the corner and pulled out the small, innocuous shoebox labeled in tiny print. Code Reds only. Put this back. Whatever is happening, it isn't a code red. I brought it down, carefully set it onto the ground in front of me, and opened the lid. Inside was a smaller box, a fire safe with a combination lock. This is really happening, huh? I'm about to go kill some innocent people to save this sorry town. I entered the combination. 666 and snapped open the lid. The code red box contained exactly 2 things: a cigarette and a hand grenade. I took the grenade and stuffed it into my hoodie pocket, right inside my... Oh, that's right, my hoodie is still outside. I took the grenade and stuffed it into my pants. What? Why don't sweatpants have pockets? I took the grenade and looked at it. How the hell was I going to transport this thing without the Queen seeing it? I couldn't very well hide it in my underwear, even if I wanted to. I didn't have time to let my next idea disgust me into reconsidering. I just bit the bullet, pried Owen's expensive suit jacket from what remained of his body, slammed it against the wall a couple times, and put it on. It fit surprisingly well, all things considered. With the grenade stuffed in the inner jacket pocket, I went to the closet door and pulled it open. As I stepped into the hallway, my shoes squished into something that felt like cat litter. It wasn't long before the liquid worked its way through my socks. The floor was completely coated in a blanket of green several inches thick. The walls were all coated in that same stuff, and the ceiling and the fixtures. I was walking down a solid green squirming tube into an equally green cave shaped like the front of the gas station. Each step I took left a small footprint that quickly filled itself back in. The mayflies had finally become maycrawls, having reached the stage in their life cycle where their wings fall off. Now they piled together, caking any surface area they could find. I could hear the sound of billions of microscopic teeth prying at the wood, slowly devouring, digesting the building from the inside out. As I passed a giant green stalagmite that was once a spinning rack of bagged chips, I saw her. She was sitting on a living, wriggling green throne where the gas station counter used to be. She had a smile on her face, the one that it stole from Yen, and an aura from the floor to the ceiling of powerful, verdant green. "I was looking for you," she said in Yen's voice. "Where did you go?" "Sorry, I slipped out of reality for a minute." "What did I miss?" "That's a neat trick. Why in the world would you ever come back?" "I was kinda hoping to save my friends. Have you seen them?" As I stood still, an untold number of crawlers climbed in my pants legs. I could feel their weight pulling me down like I was being swallowed by quicksand. "They escaped," she said, her aura never wavering. "You should have done the same thing. No matter, we could always use more food." I knew she thought she was telling the truth. I also knew that Jerry would have never left me behind, which meant he also had a plan. "Listen to me, Yen. I know you're in there." She laughed. "There is no Yen anymore." "I know you can hear me. I wanted to tell you something. I'm sure you've probably seen it a million times. When a dog comes into the shelter and there's nothing you could do for it and it's suffering, what do? When you can't treat it and you can't save it and you're out of options?" I reached inside the jacket. My fingers curled around the grenade, right as the colony of crawlers passed my knees. "Look, I just wanted to say I'm sorry, okay?" She laughed. "What do you think you can do to hurt me? I'm a god. You're food." Right as my thumb touched the grenade pin, I heard something. At first I thought it was just another hallucination, but as it grew louder and closer, it seemed even the Yen Queen was beginning to show a little concern. "Beep, beep, beep, beep. What is that?" she asked. We realized the answer at the same time, as soon as the garbage truck had backed all the way up to the building and crashed right through the front door, sending chunks of cheap wall and bug splatter all over the place. The shock of the collision freed swaths of bugs from their colonies on the ceiling, and they fell as a single enormous unit. The impact nearly doubled the size of the bug pit on the floor. It was deep enough to drown in. I released my grip on the grenade and brushed the clumps of bugs off my head and shoulders. The queen jumped to her feet and walked over to the spot on the floor. A circle cleared the way for her, revealing the clean floor underneath, and a baseball bat that she was reaching for. With the weapon in hand, she stepped over to the garbage truck. I didn't even think before bending down, scooping up a handful of Maycrawlers and smushing them into a ball, very reminiscent of a snowball. Some of them skittered up my arms, but most of them stayed intact. I lobbed it as hard as I could and struck the queen in the back of her head. She turned around with her mouth open and a very human expression on her face, one that begged the question, "Did you really just hit me with a ball of my own children?" The distraction was enough for her not to notice the sound of hydraulic lifts behind her, and before she can even take a step towards me, the gate of the garbage truck had swung open, and an avalanche of dead and rotting animals and body parts spilled onto her, crushing her. Wet goop spread across the floor, washing away heaps of crawlers. The wave of blood and viscera hit me just a few moments after the smell, and to be honest, this is also not a job for words. Whatever you imagine the smell being, I swear, it was a lot worse than that. I would have projectile vomited all over the place. But as luck would have it, there wasn't anything left inside of me. The mountain of death covered almost the entirety of the front wall now, save for a small window at the top of the door frame. Hardly enough to see it through, and certainly not enough to escape from, but I ran for it all the same. Once I hit the pile of Abrams collections, I started climbing. There were hooves and antlers, more cat faces than a grandmother's Facebook page, and an alarming number of limbs that would have at one point belonged to humans. Abram did say he had been setting traps. He didn't say what kind. When I finally reached the top of the pile, I dropped down on some sort of rib cage, squirming with green bugs, and peered out in the opening. Jerry had climbed up the other side to meet me. "Hey bro," he said excitedly, "I see you're awake now. How was the other side? Did you see the spirit guide?" Yeah, we accidentally killed him." "You what?" "Jerry, where is Lucy? She went around to the back door to rescue you while I would cause a distraction. By the way, I learned how to operate a garbage truck. It was super easy. Hey, is that Owen's coat?" I turned onto my back and slid down the mountain of gore. No sooner had my feet hit the floor than a hand erupted from below the pile and snagged my sweatpants. I ripped free right as the yen thing pushed her broken body out from under the pile. Her arms were bent in places they should not bend. Bones poked out of her skin from the inside. Animal bones poked into her skin from the outside. Her jaw dangled lopsided, and her aura burned to the ceiling, green and angry. Her vessel was broken, and she had one spare remaining. "Jack!" I turned to see the last person I wanted to see, and likely the first person the Queen wanted to see. Lucy was close enough to grab me. "We need to go now." I turned back just in time to see the Queen millipede erupt from the center of Yen's neck and launch itself forward. Lucy and I scrambled for the back door, but I knew we couldn't let it out. We needed to finish it off right here. Her hand was around my wrist. I pulled her back and wrapped my own fingers around hers. As soon as we reached the cooler, I dragged her to a stop. She looked back at me with worry in her eyes. I didn't have time to relay the whole plan. I just grabbed the cooler door and pulled, hoping she'd pick up on it. It scraped open a few inches, but the ground cover of green insects made it nearly impossible to move. Worse, the ground cover made it nearly impossible to see where the Queen had gone. Lucy grabbed the door with me, and together we pulled our weight and pried the door open, just enough to jump inside. Abram's body was still on the floor. I ran to it and freed the fillet knife just in time to hear Lucy scream. "Over there!" The Queen skittered across the wall and into a corner. I lost sight of it almost immediately. A metal shelf crashed against the floor. Then Lucy pulled me towards, then through the cooler door. Once out, she slammed it shut behind us. "What happened?" I asked. "I trapped that thing underneath some boxes." "What the hell was that?" "You're sure? You're positive you trapped it?" "Yeah, positive. It's still in there." I hate how little time I get for such important decisions, but the bugs under my clothes had started biting, so time was up. I made a snap decision to trust her. "Okay," I pulled out the grenade and yanked the pin, reopened the cooler door just enough to toss the weapon inside, then shut it and leaned my back against the door. Lucy's eyes were huge. "Was that?" She pointed at the door with horror. "Yes." Her hands grasped me by either side of my collar, and she pulled me away from the door and flung me hard into the pile of bugs in the front of the store. Before I could get up, she landed on top of me. A second later, boom! The ringing in my ears never really went away, but after a few seconds, the cloud of green dust had finally settled, and I could see that the cooler door had been blown clean off its hinges. If Lucy hadn't thrown me out of the way... Damn, movies do not do grenade blast justice. We sat up and tried to catch our breath. Lucy got to her feet first, coughing violently. I found where the fillet knife had landed, a couple feet away, grabbed it, then slowly worked my way up. Lucy leaned against the counter. She was breathing loud and fast. This whole thing had been sprint speed and marathon length, and now was the time we finally got to rest. Her head was down, her back to me. She couldn't see the knife in my hand. Just like I didn't get to see the queen trapped under that box. The spirit vision may have been an idiot, but it was also right. There was only one way to make sure the queen was dead, and stayed dead. There was only one way. Lucy wouldn't see it coming. She wouldn't feel a thing, considering how everyone else had died tonight. That's really not such a bad way to go. Would we all be so lucky? I was sitting outside in a circle of salt. Jerry figured out about an hour too late that the crawlers absolutely hate salt. Something to remember for next time, I guess. When the first helicopter landed on the street outside of our parking lot, it expelled its contents before it even finished landing. 3 guys with machine guns and gas masks. A couple in white hazmat suits and gas masks, and a familiar G-man in a black suit and tie. No gas masks on this one, just a pair of completely pointless sunglasses. The feds shouted orders to the others as they closed in on our building, but froze mid-sentence once he saw me. "Jack?" he said. "I don't believe it. I don't freaking believe it. You're still alive? Jesus, I just lost $50. "Hey there, Agent Roscoe. Well, I'll be a monkey's uncle. Wonders never cease. You're a little late to the party. Where's your partner? You know your gas station isn't the only locale of interest on a night like this, right?" He took off his sunglasses, and I swear he was wearing another pair of sunglasses underneath them, or maybe the drugs were still messing with me. It's hard to say. He looked at the teetering remains of the gas station and said, "Well, you want to start telling us what happened?" Over the next hour, I gave my statement. More choppers landed and more men in gas masks arrived to clean up the damage and mayfly debris. They had brooms, snow shovels, and devices that looked an awful lot like proton packs. A lot of them left the gas station carrying kennels with ticked-off raccoons scratching away at the walls from the inside. One of the men interrupted my story to inform Agent Roscoe that they had captured all 3 raccoons. The agent dismissed this news much more easily than I would have expected. All right, I heard enough," he said to me. "Here's how this is gonna play. You got hit by terrorists. Wait, scratch that. We already did terrorists this week. Let's just say gang activity. A local game broke in and did some Halloween vandalism. This sort of thing is an epidemic, you know? They've been going up and down the interstate, looking for gas stations off the beaten path to tear up. What about all the bodies? I asked. We'll figure that out later. Jesus, Jack, my night is just getting started. This is like my Monday morning. Get off my back. He looked over my shoulder and lowered his voice. I know you can keep a secret, but what about that one? Behind me, Jerry was cleaning off his katana by rubbing it on the grass. I wouldn't worry about him. He's what you might call an unreliable witness. Roscoe noted, then suddenly pointed at the young woman in fox makeup talking to an agent under the gas station awning about 10 feet away. What about her? She's new. Is she going to be a problem? I shook my head. No, she knows the deal already. He grinned. I want to let you in on a little secret. Just between you and me. When I first started doing this job, I thought I had a pretty finely tuned moral compass. But after a few mercy killings and real-world trolley problems, I started to realize something. The right choice and the moral choice ain't always the same thing. It's possible to do the right thing for the wrong reason, or the wrong thing for the right reason. You could be forgiven for little mistakes, even if they cause a lot of people to die gruesome deaths. Thanks, I said. And, Jack, forgive me for asking, but are you certain you saw the Queen die, right? Am I really that bad at lying, or do I just constantly encounter people with bull detectors set to 11? Yeah, I'm sure. He laughed. Oh, well, I guess we'll find out in 5 years, huh? He raised his voice and called out to the others. All right, let's double time it. Wheels up in 30 minutes. Gotta leave time for the cleanup crew. A few minutes later, the cleanup crew arrived. Jerry and Lucy approached me. Hey man, Jerry said. We're about to go back to my place and do, all the drugs. You wanna come? Before I could answer, my eyes caught something standing in the tree line across the parking lot. Something watching us with 2 shining red eyes. It was a raccoon. I know it could have been nothing more than the remnants of Jerry's tea playing tricks on me. But I could have sworn that this raccoon had an aura, one that was 10 feet tall, glowing green, and angry.